Welcome to the second tutorial flight of the IXEG V1.0 this time Autopilot and Flight Director on our way from Tucson to Las Vegas. I'm set up it just the way it says in the manual, ready to, not ready to fly, but of course the turnaround state and fuel is set up correctly, 8,000 kilograms, or the appropriate amount in pounds, just as per the manual. And the weather is nice. We're going to start setting up the air conditioning. Just going to move back a little bit so we see the whole panel. You can see here's the bleed panel. We have the APU running, providing bleed pressure to both sides of the pneumatic manifold, and the isolation valve is right now in auto. It's sometimes the switch position is kind of hard to see, but it's in the middle. And of course, if I would close it, then you see no pressure is on the right side and the duct pressure would drop. So for now we're putting it on auto, and we're turning on the left pack, so that gets some air conditioning going. And you can see up here, this is where we set the temperature, cooler or warmer, and there's even a manual mode where we can actually make the air mix valve move directly, but this is rarely used. Usually you have it on auto. Here's where you can select what the thermometer down here shows, either the supply duct or the passenger cabin. Don't use more than one pack for cooling. And if you want to read up about the isolation valve, what it does in auto, you're welcome to. Basically, it's trying to keep the duct separated unless the situation warrants opening it. For example, if you have both packs on and you see it's closed, but let's say one engine fails and you turn off the bleed, then it will open again to provide pressure to both sides, and of course the same for the other side. So this is what it does, and in normal operation with both packs on, both engines on, it's closed. In case one side ruptures, then you would lose pressure on one side and lose one pack operating, but the other pack could still pressurize the aircraft. For now we're just going to keep one air conditioning pack on. Like I said, only use one on the APU. The dual bleed light shows that right now pressure could flow from an engine back into the APU. If I close this one, it's still on, because right now the isolation valve is open and pressure from the right side could move this way into the APU, create a back pressure that's dangerous for the APU. If I close it, you see this is not possible anymore. The dual bleed light is out. And of course, if I turn both of these off, then of course no bleed can come from the engines to the APU, and it's off again. We'll just set everything back to normal. All bleeds on, this one off, this auto, and you're good to go. Next step in the manual is setting up the FMS, and we're just going to do that just the way we are used to it from the other tutorials. We'll go to the perf init page. If you don't know how to get there, if you're on any other page, just click init.ref. It always takes you there. Enter the zero fuel weight, in my case in tons, in your case maybe in thousands of pounds, and the reserves, cost index 20, and we're going to cruise it flight level 240 today. Execute, and that activates the performance calculation. I see this one is really dark, so I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit, and that makes it easier to read. Okay, now we are going to set up the takeoff ref page, or actually start with the N1 limit page. The usual flow for FMS preparation is just when you're filled one page, just click on the line, select the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right, takes you to the next relevant page. N1 limit, we say we want to put in 55. Look at the N1 values that are calculated right now for the current temperature and pressure, 91.8, 92.8. This of course depends on the pack usage. Right now the system thinks that engine 1 has to supply pack number 1, and engine 2 does not have to supply any packs. If I move up here and turn on pack number 2, then you would see that this evens out. It's just taking switch position into account, not real pack operation, because of course the right pack was not operating just a second ago. We're putting 55. This reduces the takeoff N1. This puts less stress on the engines. And in your version you should see climb 1 or maybe even climb 2 selected automatically right now. You still have to add that. I'm just going to pick that manually. This is picking also a reduced climb thrust. Next step will be to go to the takeoff page, and here we have a default setting of flaps 5. This is fine. We're just going to confirm it by putting a 5 over. Big font now. We'll accept the speeds. And for kicks we're going to go to the next page and change the thrust reduction altitude. It's usually at 1500 feet above ground level. The thrust will automatically be set to climb thrust. We'll just change that for now to let's say 3000 feet above ground level, just to demonstrate that you can influence that and it works as well. Now we're going to go back to the previous page. We have accepted the speeds here, and referencing my manual, we'll have to set up the speed box on the airspeed indicator, and we'll do that. So I have slightly different speeds than what we have in the tutorial, but this might happen or will happen depending on the weight that you set on what I used when I wrote the tutorial. So we'll just take what it says here, 125, 27, 36, and I'll put these two up here. I go 125, 127, 136 will be set with the orange caret here with the MCP speed bug, and 136 plus 15 is 151. Go over here, and we can already set this to 136. So this should look nice now. Yep, looks about right. Master caution, I cancel that. Don't know where that came from. And we are now on step number 3, getting the Autoflight system ready. Not going to set up the first officer speed indicator now, just to save some time. We're working with course 1 first. We want to set this to 308. That's the outbound radio from Tucson that we want to follow. And after that we turn on the flight director. Now here's where we get to the meat of this session. Watch what happens when I turn on the flight director. Look over here and look over here, and you get the flight director boxed, which means it was just turned on. This stays for 10 seconds. And also get the MA little master light, because the pilots always need to know which flight director is master. It's it depends on the side of the master. The master side determines which VOR, for example, is referenced, or which ILS is referenced when you use the approach mode or the VOR lock mode. So it's important to always look at this one and always have it on your side if you're the pilot flying. If I'm also going to turn on the second one, you see that there's no master light over here. If I turn this one off, the master light moves over here. Turn this one on again, master stays here. So this is the way to switch whoever is master. And the next thing we'll do is we are going to set the speed. We have that done already. We're going to set the heading. Always make sure this points straight ahead if on to your runway heading. Otherwise, when you engage the takeoff mode, then the flight director roll bar will point to the side, and this might confuse you. We're going to put in 8000. It's the first level up to altitude, and we'll set course 2 to 3. Course 2 set to 323. This is the inbound course to Phoenix VOR later on. So everything is set up ahead. And now we're going to look down at the center pedestal here. We're going to set up the radios. Tucson has 116 115.0 and Phoenix 115.6. And of course we'll set up the map mode. You have the little preview window down here and we'll get a good range. I'm going to pick 40 for now. Use the VOR and airports, and on the Copilot side we'll also use the map mode, also range 40. We'll use the nav aids and waypoints. Well, that's going to be a little too much, so we'll just stick with that. Both sides need to unset their 200 decision height here, because this is referenced off the radar altimeter. We don't use that unless we fly category 2 or 3 approaches. 200 might look like the right decision height, but when you fly in ILS category 1, you're really referencing a decision altitude, not a decision height. So if you move this to -20, then the decision height 200 that was here before disappears. And you have to do that before every flight almost, because when you have an electrical power change it will revert back to 200. Let's see what I wrote. We're going to we want to use the terrain, and therefore I'm going to, or the terrain display, therefore I'm going to turn on the weather master switch over here. The weather radar system also powers the display for the terrain, so unless this is on, nothing will show. And I'm clicking the terrain on right here. A little restriction, we only have it on the left side. This is an X-plane restriction that we haven't been able to overcome yet. We're working on it. Of course we want to be able to display weather and terrain also on the right side, but for now this is restricted to the captain's side, and you can either display terrain or weather. Again, we're working on it and hopefully overcome that. You see the red terrain, the yellow terrain, and greenish. This is the lowest terrain elevation displayed on the map. This is the whole black area here, and 9,600 feet is the highest that is on the selected map view. So this is what this means. We are going to set up the cabin pressurization control, and it's right here underneath the air conditioning. And of course we have the displays over here, and these are the 3 modes: auto, standby, manual. So we're going to use the auto mode today, so we'll have to set the flight altitude, and we'll also, this is a little tedious just the way it is in the real airplane. It's a little better because you don't have to push to change it. And we also set the landing elevation of Las Vegas. It's about 2,200 feet. So you want to set up pretty precise, because that steers the cabin altitude during the descent, and you don't want to land when you're still pressurized. This switch will be moved later, and this is in auto, so that is now we are ready to start the engines really. But what we want to do before is make sure that we have set up the system correctly for starting the engine. The first thing is to turn off the pack, check the start pressure. Needs to be at least 30 psi, so we're well above that. And the APU is not strong enough to start engines with packs going, so you always want to turn those off. And of course we're going to do the checklist really quick. This is a lengthy flight, don't want to spend more time than usual. Oxygen tested, instrument transfer switches normal, window heat on. I don't think I've done those yet. There we go, good thing we're reading the checklist. Pressurization mode selector was auto, just check that. The flight instruments are set, heading 350, altitude 2,600. Parking brake is set, and engine start levers are cut off. And of course the thrust levers are at idle. It's not here, but they should be. And before start we just keep going. Flight deck doors closed and locked. Fuel, we have 8,000 kilograms with the pumps on. Passenger signs on. And windows locked. MCP V1, VR, V2 is set to 125, 127, 136. CDO pre-flight is completed. Rudder and aileron trim 3 and 0, taxi and takeoff briefing complete, anti-collision light is on. Okay, ideally you don't have to switch anything while reading the checklist. It's not a read and do checklist, but if you're sloppy like me, then sometimes that happens. Now let's get ready to start the engines, and as I said, we'll just start with engine number 2. Move the engine start switch to ground. Observe the duct pressure dropping as the starter engage. Observe the start valve open light. See N2 increasing, and once N2 is above 22%, you can grab the start lever and move it to idle. You should see a rapid increase in EGT. N2 and N1 increasing. At 46% N2, you want to see the start switch snap to off and the start valve close, and then you're ready to start engine number 1. We call this an overlapping start, where the right engine is still spinning up, but you're already starting the left engine because now it's spinning up without starter assistance, and the APU is free to power the starter of engine number 1. This saves some time. Time is money, especially in the airline business. 22%. Idle. EGT rise. You can listen to the starter cut out at 46. Start valve open light closes, and the engine stabilizes at the idle values. We're a little bit higher than usual, so you see N1 is 25%. That's more than you would see at sea level. Okay, off we go. After start, we need to do the after start items, and we're going to connect. Whoops, wrong way. Old habit. Get the generators connected. A big sweeping arc. You can see that they are working nicely. And turn on the pitot heat. Turn on the packs again. Turn off the APU bleed. See the dual bleed light is out now. Move this one to flight. This actually will close the outflow valve, and this protects against pressure bumps during takeoff. And when you're done with this, we move these ones to continuous. Turn off the APU, we don't need it anymore. And then go down here. We'll set the auto brake. We'll set the flaps to 5. And it starts moving. We'll check the flight controls. And of course the rudder. It seems to work, and we'll do the after start checklist. Or actually it's now called before taxi. Generators on, pitot heat is on, anti-air is not required, isolation valve is in auto, engine start switch is continuous, recall checked, auto brake and RTO, engine start levers idly 10, flight controls checked, before taxi checklist completed, and now we get the clear signal from outside, request taxi, we turn on the taxi and turn off lights, and we are ready to go. Okay, to start taxiing is easy. Just release the brakes, add some thrust, usually just about 35% or so is plenty. The plane will start moving at idle, but we need a little bit of speed. Here's an important instrument during taxiing, the ground speed. This is a good reference, much better than the outside view, especially in X-plane. And for steep turns you want to be below 10 knots, or regular turns 10 to 15, for shallow turns maybe up to 20 knots. But and then when you go straight, up to around 30 knots. Now I said heading 140, that should take you to the next exit, but of course you need to make sure that you check for yourself. It depends on what kind of scenery you use. And here we go. I'm going to fast forward now to the end of the taxiway so we don't lose too much time. Okay, here we are again at the beginning of runway 29 right. Approach sector is clear, and we have the lineup clearance, so we're going to turn on the landing lights, turn off runway turn-off and taxi lights, put on the strobes, arm the auto thrust, disengage the parking brake, and taxi onto the runway. And while we do that, we do the taxi checklist. Flight controls checked, flaps 5 green light, trim is 4.something00, cabin report received, so we're ready to go. The trim should be okay at the default setting here, and we'll just do the takeoff. Now, during this takeoff, you know how the takeoffs work already, but I want you to concentrate on what the flight mode enunciation, those are the little green things that are right here. Up here say we have arm for now. This is the auto thrust channel. This is going to be the pitch channel. This is the roll channel, and this is whatever is in command. Right now it's the flight director, could be command for autopilot. And this is where it's at, and this is what's going to be interesting, especially during this tutorial flight. Okay, takeoff. I'm going to hit the toga buttons. Push my joystick all the way to the front, and here you go. N1, take off go around mode, heading select, boxed, which means just engaged. And I'm going to jump back to a more normal view. Now look at the pitch bar, just jumped up, and that's normal. It does not give any cues during the takeoff roll, so disregard it completely until you're safely off of the runway. V1, rotate. A little more, and almost 20 degrees. Gear up, and now you can start flying pitch bar. And if you do that accurately, then you'll see that speed will be about V2 plus 15. Okay, now we're at 800 feet already. I'm going to select Autopilot A. Look what happened. Toga went to MCP speed and Flight Director turned into command, which means an Autopilot is in command now, and the speed, the pitch is controlled by the mode control panel. The mode control panel is up to here, and this is the speed that it's controlling to. Remember, we set the thrust reduction altitude to 3,000 feet above ground, and until we get there, here's the radar altitude, it's going to just stay armed, which means we're at the reduced thrust that we set up for this takeoff. Now observe as we pass 3,000, and N1 engages, and we are now at reduced climb thrust, just a tiny reduction of N1. Okay, and now let's accelerate. So I'm going to take a speed of 220, which is still 5 knots under the maximum speed for flaps 5. So even if you're slow retracting your flaps, nothing will happen. I'm way over the second plastic bug, so click, click, going to flaps 1. And you see the plane pitches down to fly the new speed that I set on the mode control panel, the mode control panel speed. Over 190, safe to raise flaps, flaps up. And as the flaps go up, you will see that this barber pole, the restricting speed for flaps 1, is going to disappear. Now we have a clean aircraft and are climbing out. There's almost 8,000 feet, and you will see what happens once we reach the 8,000 feet. Here we go. Now the mode control, now the auto thrust controls the speed. So again we have a mode control panel, speed control, but the channel is over here now, the auto thrust channel. Pitch channel is in altitude acquire and will soon go to altitude hold. And the plane is leveling off at 8,000 feet. And just to demonstrate what happens, you see we're at 65% N1 now. This is going to come back a little more as we level off. And as I increase the speed here to 250, thrust levels move forward as the auto thrust is increasing power to fly 250 now. Okay, now we want to fly to radial 308. It's best way to see is if we change this to the expanded VOR mode, and you can see down here that 308 is way on our side, obviously because we flew heading 304 the whole time. So we're going over to heading of 320, and you see that the plane is banking to fly this new heading. And the next thing we want to demonstrate is how to intercept this radial. Of course you could just watch it and then use heading mode to fly along this radial, but we're going to do something different now. We'll use the VOR lock capability. It's rarely used in the real airplanes nowadays. Everything is LNAV and direct to and heading, but of course you can use it and it works. We'll just engage the mode, and if you look at the FMA, you saw there was a green light there, a white light there, but it's not on, it's just armed, and you see this here in white. While we're still flying towards the radial, we have not satisfied the capture criteria, so it's not turning green yet. We're still in heading select. The white light only means that we can deselect the mode. If I click the button again, this white VOR lock will just disappear. Doesn't mean that it's active. This is a very common misconception. People think, oh, you know what, I'm in VOR lock, the switch is on. Now it captured. See, now it turned green up here. It's boxed for the first 10 seconds, but this means it's working. The white light doesn't mean anything. And the plane will now maneuver to intercept the radial, stay on it, and follow it until we say something else. Okay, now the next step is to climb to flight level 240, and of course we'll have to change the mode control panel altitude. Right now we couldn't do anything because 8,000 is like set in stone. The autopilot will never fly past the 8,000, which is set here. So even if I pick another mode, it's not going to work. But watch what happens. Look at the altitude hold light here. There is no light, but we're in altitude hold. Why is that? Because I cannot deselect it right now. I'm at 8,000 feet, and I can't get off these 8,000 feet until I move the target altitude away. Now the light came on. See, and I'm going to move this up to 24,000. And now the light is shining, which means I can deselect the altitude hold mode if I don't want it anymore. And I do not want it anymore. We're going to click here and see what happens. Now if I deselect the pitch mode, the autopilot has no idea what to do. So it reverts to its most basic mode called control wheel steering pitch. And this means that the control wheel steers the pitch. I'll demonstrate. If I move the control wheel back, the pitch will increase. And if I let go and not do anything with the control wheel, then the pitch will stay exactly where I left it. The auto thrust is still controlling speed, so now that we're climbing, of course, we need more power. You see here the power came up a little bit. And now we can set the pitch that we want to fly directly with our yoke, which is pretty convenient if you want to fly a constant pitch. And it's a basic mode. Whenever the autopilot does not know what you want him to do, he'll go to control wheel steering pitch and just fly the pitch that is currently on, and you can change that with the yoke. The next thing we're going to do is try the vertical speed mode. And the vertical speed mode is engaged by this little button. Now look at the FMA. If I click vertical speed, you see vertical speed engages, the control wheel steering pitch disappears, it captures the current vertical speed, and I'm just I can roll this up and down by grabbing this little wheel, but push to down, then the vertical speed decreases and you see the autopilot moves smoothly to fly the new target vertical speed. And again, the button is lit, meaning I can deselect it, and if I deselect it, the autopilot will revert to a basic mode. It all sounds pretty complicated at first, but you'll see that the system is actually very logical. Okay, we're past 10,000 feet now, and I'm going to do whatever we do when we're past the 10,000 feet. We turn off the landing lights. These get usually turned off after you raise the flaps nowadays, and we put fasten belts to auto, which allows everyone to move about the cabin and go about their jolly business. Now we want to demonstrate the flight level change mode. This is the pitch mode that you'll use mostly for climbing and descending. It's the most efficient. When you click it, you will see that the auto thrust goes to maximum thrust and pitch again is controlled by the mode control panel speed, MCP speed, and this is basically the mode that we were in after takeoff as well. Going to disarm the auto brake and move the gear lever to off. Okay, now we're climbing out with flight level change, and usually above 10,000 feet we can fly faster, it's more economical. A good climb speed is around 280 to 90, so this is what we'll select. And you see as I turn this, the plane pitches down and it will accelerate to the new target speed. All the while still tracking the VOR to Phoenix. Okay, next thing that we want to do is try different roll modes, and we'll soon turn right a little bit to get to the Phoenix VOR. If I use the first officer's expanded VOR ILS mode, you can see that the radial towards Phoenix is coming up here, and we want to intercept that smoothly. Again, with the very basic mode, you see the current roll mode is VOR lock. And let's check. Yes, we can deselect it, so let's click it. It's deselected. We're in control wheel steering roll, and it works pretty much like control wheel steering pitch. You use the yoke and the plane rolls, and when you let go, it will just maintain whatever bank you have, unless the bank is very small. In that case, it will level the wings and fly vertical. So we're using this roll mode to gently bank towards the VOR. The roll mode has certain protections. For example, if you're not careful and you roll really bad and you roll past the 30 degrees and let go, you see that it will get you back within 30 degrees. That's the maximum that it will allow while you let go of the yoke. And it's not something that we use very much, but again, it's the basic roll mode, and if the autopilot does not know what you want it to do, it will revert to control wheel steering roll. Of course, we tried the heading select mode, we tried the VOR lock mode, and then there's LNAV, and that's pretty much all the roll modes that the 737 has. Okay, we're inbound to Phoenix, and I'm just going to use the heading, and if I look over at the FO side, this looks good. I'm slightly to the right, I'm turning left with the heading. Now, why don't I use VOR lock to track this? Well, you know the answer, I can't, because if you look up here, autopilot A is engaged, which means everything is slaved to the left side, to my Tucson radial, which is not what we're tracking anymore. So if I want to track towards Phoenix, I need to get that over to my side. I'll just copy what the co-pilot has, 323 and 15.6. There we go. And now I see on my side that I'm almost on the radial. So let's see what happens if I use VOR lock. It's in white and I'm close enough. It engages, plane banks slightly to get onto the inbound course towards Phoenix. Okay, we leveled off at flight level 240, still inbound to Phoenix VOR. Now it's time to, well, first we want to set the Drake VOR 14.1 on the right side VOR, VHF nav receiver 14.1, and inbound course will be 327, so get that out of the way. Now we want to do a little flight director flying. The flight director is basically showing us the commands that the autopilot would also follow. So the first thing to do when you do manual flight, you want to be in manual speed control. So we are going to deselect speed. You see it reverted to arm. I'm going to grab the thrust levers here with my ghost throttles. Now my joystick thrust levers control that again. Going to disengage the autopilot. Several ways to do it. Click here. You could use the disengage bar. That's only for emergencies though. The pilot of course pushes here on the autopilot disengage button, and I have mapped that to a joystick. And before you do, get close to your instruments, because now you want to be able to see what's going on. I'm going to click once, click twice. You see the command disappeared and I'm in autopilot mode. Now the plane wasn't trimmed very well. Autopilot isn't always trimming 100% perfectly, otherwise it would be running all the time and people would go crazy in the cockpit. So be ready to take over, trim a little bit yourself, and ideally you want to zoom in until you can see your E80i very well, and you see that little bar there. Keep them centered. If the roll bar is off to the left side, let's say I'm a little unattentive and I'm looking here to the, but looking very well, plane or flying a little to the right, then you see the bars showing me steer left, steer left. So I'm going to roll left until it's in the middle again, and it will basically now say, okay, now it's time to roll back. So keeping it centered. And a little more over, and if you look a little more out, you see the radial down here. This is why it's tracking like this. Now we're really close to the VOR, getting into the so-called cone of silence, where the signal gets jittery, and I'm not going to fly like crazy to get this centered again. Sometimes you have to be able to look through the flight director, because it's just a machine and doesn't know everything, and that's what I'm doing now. So I'm just going to wait until I pass overhead the VOR, and see now the needle is falling. Okay, enough with the flight director flying. It's really jittery here at flight level 290, so I'm going back to my regular view. I'm turning on the autopilot again. It will immediately engage MCP speed all again. This is like a safety feature. Whenever you turn on the autopilot, it's going to capture the MCP speed mode again to get the auto thrust to control your speed, so you don't fall out of the sky if you don't pay attention. I want to now, where are we? Here we go. Fly course 330 I set, and that is the outbound course from Phoenix. Of course this messes up the autopilot. It's chasing now after the VOR, especially that close to the station. It's very sensitive still, but it will eventually get back to the radio, intercept that and fly that outbound from Phoenix. Okay, let's climb to flight level 290. That's the next step. And as you can imagine, of course, we need to tell the autopilot to climb, but let's not forget the cabin control. It's set to 240, but now that we want to climb a little higher, we need to do that, set it up correctly. We will change the flight altitude to 29,000 feet. You can see the cabin starts climbing immediately, and this caters for our impending climb to flight level 290. Going to change the altitude on the remote control panel, 29,000 feet, hit level change, and N1 engages. The speed control changes from the thrust channel to the pitch channel, and the plane will pitch up to get to the new altitude. Finally, looks like it managed to capture and track the radio okay. Again, this is a mode that we don't like to use. VOR radials are a little jittery sometimes, and it makes the plane bank left and right, and it's just not very comfortable, but you can use it in a VOR approach when you're close to the station. The signal is pretty good and you're busy with other things. As we're climbing now to flight level 290, you can see that the speed reference will change in a minute. Right now it says 290, but you might have noticed up here it says IAS/Mach. At high altitudes this will change to Mach automatically. You can force it with this changeover button, but there's a certain algorithm behind the scenes, and at a certain altitude it will change automatically. Right now, see here it did. You won't see anything, there's no warning, no flashing light or anything, it just silently switches to Mach, and now the plane will climb with reference to Mach speed. I'm going to fast forward again until we're level at flight level 290 and continue from there. Okay, I'm level at flight level 290. I just want to show you what happens when I turn off the flight directors. And you see nothing happens. The bars disappear, but the plane flies just as well. So we'll turn them back on. And I want to show you the bank angle limiter. It's down here, and you can go from 10 degrees to 30 degrees, and if I go to 10 degrees and use heading select to make a turn, you see that the bank angle is limited to 10 degrees only. I fast forwarded quite a bit. We're almost at the Drake VOR, so I'm using the heading bug to track towards Drake. I can't use VOR lock because Drake 14.1 is set on the right side and the Autopilot A is in command, so it could only track whatever is set up on the left side. Okay, I'm going to pass Drake and then head towards Boulder, and just as we approach the descent point, I'm going to pick up again. Okay, we're back outbound from Drake VOR towards Boulder, about 36 miles to go, and we should not forget to put the bank angle limiter back to 25. And now we want to prepare the descent. We will set Boulder on VHF 1, 16.7, that's done. Las Vegas on the right one, 16.9. And we did a little math here for the descent, so we need about 80 nautical miles, and so plus a little bit for the turn to the ILS. 85 miles from Las Vegas we want to start the descent, which is in 30 miles. So again, I'm fast forwarding just to the point where we are ready to start the descent. We're coming up on our descent point, 93 miles to go, another 8 miles before we want to start the descent. And during the descent we'll do some stuff to prepare for the approach, but of course it's important not to miss the top of descent, because otherwise it would get too high and then get into trouble. There's Boulder, Las Vegas behind it, so we're getting close, and 90 miles, another 5 to go. You know what, let's just start the descent, and of course we'll start with level change. Now watch what happens. We had N1 here before, an MCP speed, that's for the climb. Of course we need to do something. First we need to reset the MCP altitude, otherwise it won't work. The Autopilot would capture 29,000 feet immediately again. So move this one down, and now as we hit level change you see that the thrust mode is retard. Retard means pull back the thrust levers until they cannot move anymore. Auto thrust will try for a few seconds, and then when it realizes that they don't move anymore, you can even use your hands to hold them, it reverts to arm. And now it's ready to spring into action should the need arise. And of course the pitch channel is mode control panel speed, so now the plane will just go down with decimal 7.1. Now the auto throttle is not engaged. I can use my ghost throttles here to grab it, for example, and then add a little bit of thrust. You see here the N1 will increase. Nothing will change. The Autopilot doesn't even know that I'm doing it. It will just feel that suddenly, because I need a little more at this altitude, it will just feel that suddenly the speed is increasing, and it's going to have to raise the nose to fly or track the correct speed. So this is a way for you to stretch your descent, for example, if you need to. But I'm just going to put this back to idle now, and the plane just reverted to Mach 290 here. A little too fast for my likes. I think we should descend at 280 only. And here we go. Okay, another thing that you could do, of course, is you could use vertical speed, and this would work just the same. Automatically, MCP speed is selected in the auto thrust mode, vertical speed, and you can set the vertical speed directly with the wheel, just like we did before. But let's go back to level change, retard, MCP speed again. The plane goes down. Okay, let's get ready for the approach. We want to do an automatic approach today, so we would need both autopilots, and for that we will need the ILS on both sides set. We will still need Las Vegas for now, but we can already set the inbound course. It's 255, and since we're not tracking any radial, we can also do that here. And we can already arm the speed brake. Again, I'm using my joystick button for that, and observe the green light. And I want to arm the auto brake to 3. That's the deceleration setting that we want to use. And I'm checking over here. We're not tracking nicely towards the boulder, so I'm using my heading select to fly a little bit more towards the right. And that's getting us a little closer. Of course, the range isn't ideal. Come down on the range a little bit, and now I'll be able to see what's happening a little better. A few more degrees to the right. Now it's going to pass right through boulder. Perfect. You want to check the approach speed, and in the air, if you click initRef, it will always take you to the approach reference page. We will do a flaps 40 approach, so we'll just copy this down to the scratch pad, reinsert it. You see big font. This will make it active later on here on the E80i speed tape. And of course we want to set up 124, and I like to set 2 bugs on a flaps 40 approach just as a reminder. 124 plus 15 is 139. This is where the maneuvering speed bug goes, and then later on the target speed will be 129. This is something that we don't need right now, so I put it on 0. This is like just a reminder for the minimum. If you do a Cat 1 or non-precision approach, this time we're doing a category 3A approach to a decision height of 50 feet above ground. And this is when one of the few rare occasions when you will use this decision height reference button, of course on both sides, and set it to 50. This is the lowest decision height that the 737 Classic may fly to, since it cannot do an automatic rollout. It has no control over the nose wheel or the rudder. The pilot needs to be able to roll out the plane. That's why you need to decide at 50 feet, can you see the runway or can't you see it? And if you can't, you need to go around. Otherwise, you might touch down and then determine that the visibility isn't good enough to steer the runway or steer the plane on the runway. That's why it has a decision height, as opposed to more modern planes that can also do the rollout automatically and have much lesser RVR needed for the approach. Okay, while we're still descending, probably a good time to do the approach checklist. And I forgot one thing, of course, the recall. Did that. And so approach, recall checked, cabin control set. We haven't changed that. It's still set for the Las Vegas field elevation. Auto brake is 3, speed box 124, 139, and the altimeters, we would read those below transition level. We have set perfect weather today, so we can already say 1013 16,000 or 29.92 16,000, and then cross-check that with the other side to make sure that everyone is on and altimeter setting below the transition altitude. Okay, the next thing to do is I'm going to slow down a little bit already. I'm going to pick 250, and of course the nose pitches up, and we'll keep descending towards Boulder, and over Boulder turn right heading 320. Slow down immediately because it's not far from Boulder to fly to the ILS, and I'm going to fast forward to just overhead Boulder. Okay, we're coming up on Boulder VOR, and another 5 miles to go. We're also approaching 4,900 feet. You want to target that as well. Reach the 4,900 just before Boulder. That's perfect. And then immediately start slowing down, making the turn. I don't need Las Vegas anymore, so I'm going to set the frequency for the VOR, for the ILS already on the VOR right side, 111.75. And I have the course set here, so when I want to set it on VOR1 as well, I just need to reference the frequency over here. Another 600 feet to go, and let's do everything at once. Turn right heading 320 and reduce speed to minimum clean. Always make it a habit of going to the next limit. So with flaps up you can fly to 10, so you don't want to dial in 150 here just because eventually you want to go slow, and then you forget something and you forget to drop the flaps. So that would be a little dangerous. Okay, now we don't need Boulder anymore either, so I'm going to put 111.75 on VOR1 as well. And we're past 225, so I select flaps 1, and the next target speed would be 190. I'm going to arm the approach mode, and you can see as I push the arm, you get the glide slope blue and the VOR lock in blue. And I will also select the expanded VOR ILS on both sides, so we will have good information here on the localizer and on the glide slope deflection. Okay, we're almost coming up on 190 knots, and certainly below the placard speed for flaps 5, so we're going to click flaps 5 and select speed 170, which is the maneuvering speed for flaps 5. These are speeds you'll eventually have to memorize. Make yourself a little cheat card or whatever. Not sure, don't we even have something here on the back side? Yeah, there we go. Tour info, flaps 5, 170, so it's right there in case you forget. VOR lock captured, that means the localizer is here. We're going to overshoot because this was almost a 90-degree intercept. Now we can put the heading bug also to the front. 255 is the inbound course, and you will see the plane will turn to recapture the localizer. Here's already the glide slope. You must have captured the localizer before the plane will follow the glide slope. If you haven't done that, it will just disregard the glide slope coming in. And but now hopefully it will capture it. And we're at 170 knots, so we're in a good spot to start the approach. Here glide slope is captured. It says one channel because only one channel is active. I'm going to engage Autopilot V now as well. This is the rare occasion where you can engage both autopilots at the same time, but remember the ILS must be set on both sides. And you still see the one channel here because the second channel will not engage until you have completed the self-test at about 1500 feet above ground level. Okay, I'm going to continue with the approach here, gear down, and decreasing the speeds further to 150, gears down, so we go 10, 15, and the target speed will be 129. So now flaps are at 15, we can go to 129, and when we approach 140, maybe a little earlier, we can go to flaps 25 right now, and then minimum speed for flaps 25 would be 140, so we go in one step, click to flaps 40. That is the final flap setting that we want to have. Okay, now we're ready to go, and I will read the checklist after we observe the self-test here. See the little jittering, that's normal for flaps 40 approach. And at 1500 feet above ground level you see the scales start flashing. And once this receiver integrity self-test completes successfully, we want to see a flare armed up here. This signifies that auto land is going to work. Here's the self-test completed, flare armed, so we're ready to go. Now time for the final checklist. Start switch is continuous, they are continuous. Speed brake armed green light, gear down 3 green, and flaps 40 green light.
1,000.
And that means the final check is completed, 1000 feet is checked. Of course, here's the runway already, but if the weather was really that bad, we wouldn't be able to see it. I'm going to do the auto land this time, and then later on I'll shoot another short movie where I do the go around so you can see how that works if you do an automatic. At 400 feet, I want you to observe the mist trim. This is also a safety feature of the dual channel approach, where the plane deliberately trims the nose up, so in case the autopilots disengage by accident close to the ground, the nose will rise automatically. So the plane will trim the nose up, and you will see that the yoke is pushing forward. The autopilot is pushing forward with the yoke right here in preparation for this critical phase. 100 above is at 150. 100 above.
100. Minimum.
Continue.
30,
There is
20,
green.
10.
Alright. Auto throttle disconnects after 2 seconds automatically. And we deploy the reversers and disconnect the autopilot. It cannot steer on the ground anyway. We use rudder pedals to stay on the center line while we let the auto brake do its job of slowing the aircraft down if we want to, all the way to a complete standstill. This concludes tutorial, and I'm going to shoot another video with a go around so you see how that works as well. Okay, the second approach, and this time we'll do an automatic go around. It's important to again have the toga buttons mapped to a joystick, and I also mapped the flaps 15 command to a joystick button because this will happen fast. I will initiate the go around when we're really close to the ground, and I will just push the toga button once so you can see what happens then. Disregard that, that's just from me repeating the movie. And let's pretend I don't see anything at the minimum. Go around. Push the toga button once. You see the plane pitches up, and go to flaps 15 immediately, and gear up. Of course you get the gear warning for a second as the flaps travel to flaps 15, and you see on the flight mode enunciation we're in go around, toga, and this is blank because the plane is just flying constant track. If I push the toga buttons a second time, it goes to N1. This is the full go around power. This is what you would actually want to do when you're that close to the ground. And observe the speed cursor. It's jumping to 150 because we're at flaps 15 now. I'm going to raise the flaps to 5, and automatically it jumps to the maneuvering speed for flaps 5. This is also a feature of the automatic go around where you are busy with the bad visibility and need all the help that you can get. And now we can go to flaps 1 and flaps up, and now that we're acquiring the altitude, we're out of the special go around mode, so we have to take care of our speed ourselves again. Select 220, and that's that.